I never imagined I'd end up running the family business, but my father's dominant presence in the landscaping world led me down that path. What started with simple tasks like organizing files and sweeping floors slowly expanded into greater responsibilities. Eventually, I came to appreciate the business not just for what it was, but for the lessons it instilled in me. My father always believed in the value of hard work. He often sent me out into the field, insisting I learn firsthand about the tough, hands-on side of landscaping and understand the importance of grit and integrity. By the time I finished high school, I was already leading crews during the summer months, building a deep connection with the business. So, when it was my turn to take the reins, I knew there was a lot of weight on my shoulders. Still, with my father's wisdom guiding me and my own drive, I felt ready. Running the business in today's tech-driven world introduced its fair share of new challenges. Modern tools, while they simplify tasks like payroll and invoicing, also have a tendency to cause chaos when they fail. In my 7 years as the head of the company, I've encountered my share of computer crashes. Those experiences taught me to always prepare for the worst, so I set up both local and cloud backups to safeguard our data. I also devised backup plans for critical systems, ensuring we could continue working smoothly even when things went wrong. But enough about technology. Let me introduce myself. My name's Kyle Baldwin. I'm 35 years old, standing at 6'5" and weighing in at 225 pounds, with a deep tan from spending years working outdoors. My wife, Ashley, is also 35. She's a personal trainer with striking blonde hair, blue eyes, and a toned, athletic physique. We've been married for 13 years and have 2 kids, Clara, who's 9, and Derek, who's 7. Baldwin Landscaping was founded by my father, and being an only child, it was always clear that I would take over eventually. I worked closely alongside my parents, and my dad, who believed in learning from the ground up, made sure I spent plenty of time out in the field. To my surprise, I enjoyed it. By high school, I was already leading crews, and 7 years ago, I officially took over the company. Since then, I've expanded the business to 12 crews, offering everything from basic lawn care to large-scale landscaping projects, including snow removal in the winter. Although I spend more time in the office now, I still like visiting work sites when I can. March and April are especially hectic for me, packed with tax filings, employee records, and client contracts. This year, my mom stepped in to help with the administrative side. But, since she's not exactly tech-savvy, she accidentally deleted some crucial files. Thankfully, I had backups, but it still took longer than I'd have liked to restore them. While the files were loading, I turned to GeoScope, a tool I regularly use for project planning. It's an affordable way to preview properties before diving into big projects. After finishing my work on a client site, I had a little extra time, so I decided to pull up my own house on GeoScope. I'd been considering putting in a pool now that the kids were older and could actually enjoy it. But as I zoomed in on the image, something odd caught my eye. A car in my driveway that I didn't recognize. I know most of Ashley's friends and what their cars look like, but this one was unfamiliar. It seemed like the photo had been taken fairly recently. The snow was still on the ground, and the garage extension I just finished a few months ago was visible. The car was red, but I couldn't make out the make or model. Intrigued, I switched to GeoScope Street View for a better angle. The Street View image was clearly taken later in the year. By then, the dogwoods were in bloom and the mystery car was gone. But what I saw next hit me like a ton of bricks. Standing in my front doorway, clearly visible, was Ashley. She was hugging and kissing a man I didn't recognize. A surge of anger hit me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I printed out several copies of the image and studied them carefully. The man's face was partially obscured by the angle of the shot, but something about him seemed familiar. After a few moments of thinking, it clicked. He looked like Ashley's old college boyfriend, Nate Conors. That realization hit me like a punch in the gut. I needed to figure out what was going on before jumping to any conclusions. My mind raced through possible options. Hidden cameras, recording devices, or even hiring a private investigator. But before doing anything drastic, I needed more information. So I dug into Nate's background. A quick Google search revealed that after a brief stint in the NFL, cut short by a knee injury, He'd turned to real estate and had recently opened his own office in town. He was married with a child. His wife, Honora, was a striking woman with curly brown hair and green eyes. But honestly, in my opinion, she didn't compare to Ashley. The fact that Nate was back in town, combined with the image I'd just seen, left me feeling sick. I wondered if Nate's wife knew anything. She worked as an accountant in his office, which meant she'd probably have little oversight of his comings and goings. The thought of it made my blood boil. I glanced at the clock. 10:33 a.m. I found Nate's office number and dialed. A friendly voice picked up, saying Nate was out showing a property and wouldn't be back for at least an hour. I didn't leave a message. I hung up, my mind spinning. I didn't have concrete proof of an affair, but Ashley's behavior in that photo made it impossible to ignore. The man she was with bore an uncanny resemblance to her ex, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sitting at my desk, I stared at the printout, frustration boiling inside me. I knew I had to do something. I grabbed the photo and my keys, heading toward my truck. As I climbed in, I spotted a small toy car in the back seat. It was one of Derek's. It made me pause. I thought about the kids and how any impulsive decisions I made could affect them. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to think clearly. With resolve, I drove to Nate's real estate office. It was located in a sleek office complex downtown. When I pulled in, I spotted one of my landscaping crew foreman working nearby. He gave me a nod, but I didn't stop to talk. My focus was on confronting the situation head-on as I walked through the modern office building in my work clothes. As I made my way to the 5th floor, I couldn't help but notice the curious glances from the well-dressed employees in the building. I stepped into Conors Realty and immediately spotted Honora Conors. She was taller and more athletic than I'd imagined from her photos, but her smile was warm and her handshake was firm. She certainly made a good first impression. "Hi, I'm Kyle Baldwin," I introduced myself. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Baldwin. How can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but guarded. "Mrs. Conors," I replied, keeping my tone calm but purposeful. "I have a photo I'd like you to see, and I have a few questions." Her smile faded as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't about buying a house. Her eyes narrowed with caution, but she maintained her composure. "All right," she said after a pause, glancing over at the receptionist. "Cover the front desk for a bit," she instructed, then led me to a small, private break room at the back of the office. She sat down at the table, her body language clearly signaling that she was ready for me to get straight to the point. I slid the photo across the table. "The woman in this photo is my wife, Ashley," I began, holding her gaze. "She dated Nate Conors back in college. Does this man look like your husband to you?" Honora hesitated before taking the photo. I watched her expression shift, curiosity giving way to sadness, which quickly morphed into a hard edge of anger. After a few tense moments, she handed it back. "Yes, that's him," she confirmed, her voice firm. "When was this taken?" she asked, her tone clipped. "About 3 months ago," I replied. I explained that I had found it on GeoScope. I pointed out the earrings Ashley was wearing in the picture, ones I had given her for Christmas, which helped confirm the timeline. For a split second, Honora's face softened, a flicker of sympathy flashing in her eyes. But it was brief, fleeting. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said, her voice sharp, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "Have you confronted your wife?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not yet," I admitted, feeling the weight of my words. "She should be at work right now." Honora didn't hesitate. "Are you sure about that?" she asked, her voice pointed. Her question hit harder than I expected, so I called Ashley's phone. No answer. I then dialed the gym where Ashley worked as a personal trainer. Her coworker, Pega, picked up the phone. "Ashley just left about 10 minutes ago," Pega said after a pause. "She said she was going to meet you for lunch at Porter's Grill." I hung up, my heart sinking. That was a lie. I pulled up my phone tracking app, and sure enough, Ashley was still at home. I shared this with Honora, and her eyes went cold. Without saying a word, She shot up from her seat and stormed toward the front of the office. "Tom," she called to the receptionist. "I'm going to lunch. If Nate comes back before I do, call me immediately." Her fury was palpable as we made our way to the elevator. As the doors closed, Honora glanced at me, her eyes hard as steel. "He better have a damn good explanation for that photo," she muttered under her breath. "Sounds like you've dealt with something like this before?" I said before I could stop myself, regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. She sighed and nodded. "Yeah, back when we lived in Colorado. We moved here for a fresh start. But if this is what he calls starting fresh, he's done." The drive was quiet, the only sound the hum of the engine. The tension in the air wasn't directed at each other, but at the people we had both trusted. Eventually, Honora spoke again, her voice quieter now. "I'm surprised your wife would bring him into your home," she said, almost to herself. I gritted my teeth. "She knows I'm buried in the office this time of year. She'd have plenty of warning if I ever came home early." I glanced at Honora, noticing the way she was watching me closely. Realizing how bitter I sounded, I softened my tone. "I guess I'm just too predictable, too trusting. For all I know, this could have been going on for years." Honora didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "There are usually signs when a spouse is cheating," she said, her eyes distant as though she was reliving her own painful memories. "Yeah, I know," I muttered, "but there haven't been any. Nothing's changed. She's still the same with me, still the same with the kids. It all feels normal." "That's how it was with Nate too," she replied, her voice cracking slightly. She fell silent then, and I didn't press her to elaborate. We both knew too much about how this kind of thing worked. I spotted a red car parked in my driveway. My heart rate spiked. "That's Nate's car?" Honora said flatly, her tone a strange mix of anger and sadness. "If we find what we think we will, it'll probably end both of our marriages." I parked a few houses down, not wanting to announce my arrival. Honora followed me as I made my way to the backyard. I noticed her reaching into her purse and pulling out a small digital camera. I cursed myself silently for not grabbing mine from the office. We entered the house quietly through the back door. It didn't take long for us to hear it. Ashley's voice, unmistakable, the kind of sounds that make your stomach drop. My heart shattered. The rage that flared inside me was like wildfire, but I signaled for Honora to follow me slowly. We moved through the kitchen as the sounds from the living room grew louder. I steeled myself for what I was about to see, fully expecting to find Ashley and Nate together on the couch. But what I saw hit me like a freight train. She was with another woman. My head spun. I felt a mix of confusion and disbelief. I scanned the room, trying to make sense of the scene. Then I saw Nate. He was across the room, recording everything on a tablet. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Honora raised her camera, steadying her hand as she began filming. I stood frozen for a moment, the anger inside me threatening to burst. I wasn't sure I could control it. And then, I saw Nate step closer, still filming. That was the tipping point. I snapped. "Don't!" Honora hissed, grabbing my arm in a last-ditch effort to stop me. But she couldn't hold me back. I stormed into the living room, and every head turned. Ashley's face went pale as her eyes went wide in shock. The other woman froze, her expression full of fear. But it was Nate I went for. I grabbed him by the collar and threw him to the ground with such force that his tablet flew from his hands. "Shut up, all of you!" I roared, my voice thick with the pain of betrayal. I raised my fist, glaring down at Nate, ready to break something. "Don't move, or I swear I'll tear you apart." Everything was still, except for the other woman, who shrank back into the corner, trembling. Laura Ross's face went white with terror. Took me a moment to register where I'd seen her before. "Laura Ross?" I asked, my voice hard with disbelief. She nodded, her eyes brimming with shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "Laura Ross, my 19-year-old neighbor. The same girl who'd babysat for us more times than I could count." I stared at her, my mind racing to piece together how it had come to this. How long? I demanded, my gaze dark as I turned it on her. How long has this been going on? She glanced at Ashley, then back at me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. How long? I growled, my voice rising, rougher now, barely containing the anger burning inside me. This is only the second time, I swear, Laura stammered, her voice shaking, pleading. I swear to God, Kyle. You're a damn liar. I snarled, stepping closer. This wasn't about gender or the type of betrayal, it was about the fact that my wife had betrayed me, that Laura had been a part of it. The anger surged again, uncontrollable. I reached down and grabbed Nate's tablet off the floor, holding it up to her face, making sure she saw the video clearly. I've got a video of you doing things you never want anyone to see. Get out of my house. Never come back. If you so much as accidentally contact my wife again, I'll make sure this video goes viral. Your family, your friends, your job, they'll all see it. I'll ruin your life. Do you understand me? Laura's face turned ghostly pale as her eyes widened in fear. Her lips trembled as she whispered, Yes, I understand. Good. I snapped, my gaze cold as steel. Now get out. You dirty homewrecker. Without another word, she grabbed her things and fled. Her footsteps hurried, desperate not to look back. I turned my attention to Ashley, who was still sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands as her sobs filled the room, muffled but steady. The tears didn't move me anymore. I was done showing mercy. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed Jacob, my father-in-law. I put the call on speaker. The moment Ashley heard his voice, her head shot up, her red-streaked face flooded with panic. Her eyes begged me silently, pleaded with me not to do this. But I wasn't about to let her off easy. Hey, Jacob, I said, keeping my voice steady, but hard as stone. Hey, Kyle. Good to hear from you, son. How's everything going? He replied warmly, his tone full of that casual warmth that made my stomach turn. Not great, I said flatly. Something serious has happened between Ashley and me. Can you and Rosie come over right away? His tone shifted instantly. Are the kids okay? He asked, his voice thick with concern. The kids are fine, I replied. This is between Ashley and me. I glanced over at Ashley, who was now visibly shaking, her body racked with sobs. I'd rather show you than explain it over the phone. There was a long pause, the silence hanging heavy. I could almost hear him piecing it together. Finally, Jacob's voice returned, low and heavy. We'll be there in 15 minutes. Please don't do anything rash until we get there. I won't, I said firmly, ending the call without another word. I repeated the same conversation with my own parents, telling them they needed to come over. When I hung up, I shoved the phone back into my pocket and looked at Ashley. She was a mess, unrecognizable, a pile of tears on the couch. Honora stayed calm, her arms folded, eyes trained on me like she was holding herself back from doing something she'd regret. He needs a hospital, she said, gesturing to Nate, who was slumped against the wall, still dazed. Kyle, I get that you want to help him, but I'm not sure it's wise to let him sit there like that. I'm not done yet, I said coldly, my gaze unwavering. When I'm finished, you can call an ambulance. But until then, he stays right there. Honora's eyes narrowed, realizing that I had no intention of letting Nate leave until I got everything I needed from him. Fine, she sighed, clearly fed up with the whole situation. Call an ambulance when you're done. But I'm still taking him to the ER no matter what. I gave a short nod. That's fair. Keep the tablet and the camera until I get what I need. After that, I'll need the camera back. I want it for the divorce. Her gaze softened, just a little. Understood. She pulled out her phone and dialed her office, informing them she'd be closing for the day due to an emergency. Tell them Mr. Conors is being taken to the ER, she said coldly, her tone dismissive as she hung up. I couldn't help but wonder why she was still with him, why she was still putting up with him after everything he'd done to her. But that was her choice, not mine. My parents were the first to arrive. They lived closer. Mom froze in the doorway when she saw the scene. Her eyes flicked from Ashley to Nate to Honora, her mind trying to process what was happening. Dad stayed quiet, his gaze steady but sharp. He walked over, put a hand on my shoulder, gripping it firmly, silently offering his support. "Kyle, what's going on?" Mom asked, glancing at Ashley, her face slowly turning bright red as she processed the situation. Her eyes flickered from shock to embarrassment. "Kyle, what is all this?" she repeated, now flustered and unsure of what to say. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them everything, every ugly, raw detail. I left nothing out. Then I offered to show them the footage from both angles. Mom's face went crimson, and she raised a hand to stop me. "No," she said, horrified. "That won't be necessary." She pulled a small blanket from a chair and moved toward Ashley, but I stepped forward and stopped her. "No, Mom," I said, my voice hard, cold, unwavering. "I want Jacob and Rosie to see her for exactly what she is. I want them to understand that this wasn't my fault." "Please, Kyle," Ashley sobbed. "Don't do this." "Shut up," I growled, the rage bubbling up. "What did you expect? I caught you, and now you think I'm supposed to just let it go? You're delusional." Minutes later, Jacob and Rosie arrived. Rosie gasped the moment she saw Ashley sitting on the couch. Her eyes flicked to mine, then back to Ashley, and she nearly tripped as she stepped inside. "What is going on here?" Rosie asked, her voice rising with panic. "Ask your daughter," I said, turning toward Ashley. "Want to explain? Or should I?" When Ashley stayed silent, I did it for her. I recounted everything, the discovery on GeoScope, my meeting with Honora, and the horror show I'd walked into when I got home. I left nothing out. The room was dead quiet. No one spoke. Then, finally, Rosie muttered, "This must be a mistake. Ashley would never do this." I pulled the SD card from my pocket and held it up. "I want to see the proof," I said flatly. "Don't," Mom said, her voice strained with sympathy. "It won't solve anything. It'll just hurt everyone." "I'm done with people doubting me," I replied, my voice low and deadly. "This gets settled today." "All right," Jacob said, raising his hands like a referee calling for a timeout. "What are you going to do, Kyle? That's the real question." I didn't hesitate. "Divorce," I said firmly. "I'm done." I glanced at Ashley, and for a moment, she looked like she might faint. I turned back to Jacob and continued, my voice steady and cold. "I want full custody of Clara and Derek. Ashley can have visitation, but the kids live with me," I said, my voice cold and final. "That's non-negotiable." Rosie looked like she was about to object, but I cut her off before she could speak. "This isn't a negotiation," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "If I don't get custody, I'll make sure everyone sees that video. And I mean everyone." My eyes locked on Ashley's, and I could feel the tension in the room thickening. "Do you understand me?" Ashley's face twisted with rage. "Don't you dare call me a homewrecker," she screamed, her voice breaking. "Homewrecker," I repeated, venom lacing my tone. "And I'm not letting you raise my daughter to be like you." The argument stretched on for what felt like hours. We shouted, we blamed each other, we both shouted over each other, until I finally realized the school bus would be arriving soon. "The kids will be home soon," I said, my tone flat. "Go clean yourself up and get dressed. We'll explain why Mommy won't be living here anymore." "Fine," Ashley shot back, her eyes full of anger and spite. "But I'll tell them why Daddy isn't here anymore either." "Do whatever you want," I said, heading toward the den. My mind was already set. The fight with her was already over. But she followed me, panic flashing across her face. She knew where I was headed. "Wait!" she shrieked. "You won't get custody, Kyle. The courts won't give it to you." I didn't stop walking. "These days," I said, my voice steady, almost cold, "I could commit a crime and still win custody." She wasn't done yet. "Not if I tell the judge you don't want it," she shot back, her defiance reigniting. I turned to face her fully, my rage simmering. "Do you hate me that much?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Yeah," I said, not even hesitating. I'll never forgive you if you don't give me what I want. I'll burn us both down. Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel a shred of victory. I just felt tired. Back in the living room, I overheard Rosie whispering to my dad. He won't really do it, will he? Sam? She asked, panic in her voice. Dad's reply was blunt, with no hesitation. After what she did, I hope he does. When I walked back into the room, everyone's eyes were on me. Rosie shifted nervously, her eyes pleading with me, but I didn't care. I was beyond caring. You're all free to leave, I said, my voice like ice. Take Ashley with you. And that's how it ended. I called her bluff and she called mine. But unlike her, I wasn't bluffing. After the divorce, when the judge awarded Ashley full custody of the kids, she gave me a smug, almost victorious smile. I didn't flinch, didn't react. I just stared back, unflinching, unaffected. Later that day, I sat alone at a corner table in a coffee shop, Nate's tablet in my hands. I edited the video, removing anything that could come back to bite me, and uploaded it to every site I could think of. Using Nate's email, I sent the link to Ashley's family and posted it on Nate's social media accounts. Satisfied? I thought, as I walked to a nearby bridge. I tossed the tablet into the river, my final act of defiance. True to my word, the video went viral and Ashley became somewhat infamous. She lost her job at the gym, and finding new employment became nearly impossible. She tried to claim part of Baldwin Landscaping, but since I didn't technically own the company, my dad did, she had no legal right to it. My salary came directly from my father, keeping our finances completely separate. The judge ordered me to pay $600 a month in child support, but my lawyer managed to delay the payments until the paternity test results came in. I mostly pushed for the test just to get under Ashley's skin, but I'll admit, I was relieved when it confirmed that Greta and Derek were mine. Ashley was awarded half of our joint savings and checking accounts, but she couldn't afford to keep the house. She sold it and we split the profit. She used her share to buy a smaller house nearby, and I bought a smaller place in the same school district so the kids wouldn't have to switch schools. It wasn't as big as our old home, but it worked. I tightened my budget to make things work. Though my dad offered to raise my salary, I declined. I didn't want to risk increasing my child support payments, not while I was trying to make ends meet in this new life. Greta and Derek liked the new house, but they hated that their mom and I weren't together anymore. I kept them busy, trips to the park, hiking trails, and occasional visits to the aquatic center for swimming. They never stopped asking if we could get back together, and I made it clear that wasn't happening. We're not getting back together, I'd tell them. I don't feel that way about her anymore. A new start. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Peggy Bryant, one of the trainers from the gym where Ashley used to work. We bumped into each other at the grocery store, and after a few minutes of catching up, I noticed something different in the way she was looking at me. When she asked if I was seeing anyone, I told her I wasn't. She leaned in, her fingers brushing lightly against my arm. Do you like what you see? She teased, a playful grin on her face. Yeah, I do, I replied, a smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. Seizing the moment, I added, how about dinner at my place? Maybe we can talk about dessert, too. Her grin widened. Sounds like a plan, she said. That night, we had dinner together at my place, and something just clicked. Peggy was everything I hadn't realized I needed: smart, funny, and amazing with the kids. By our third date, we decided to be exclusive. I never regretted it. She filled the empty space in my life, and for the first time since the divorce, I felt genuinely happy. A few months later, I got a call from my former in-laws. It was Jacob, and his tone was serious. Ashley's in the hospital, he said, his voice tight. Kyle, we need you to pick up the kids. I didn't ask why she was in the hospital. I only asked, is it something that will hurt the kids? No, Jacob replied. His voice was strained. She's at the Catherine Center. I knew that name. It was a mental health facility. I shrugged and ended the call. On my way to pick up Greta and Derek, I thought about Ashley for a moment. I'd wondered 1,000 times why she'd thrown everything away, but I'd never asked her directly. I didn't trust her to give me the truth. In the end, it didn't matter. Cheating was unforgivable, and I wasn't about to lose my self-respect by staying with her. When I arrived at the Abbott house, I could tell the kids were shaken. Greta and Derek clung to each other like they had just survived something terrible. Jacob looked bitter, his eyes dark with anger as he sent them inside to grab their things. When it was just the two of us, Jacob confronted me. "What's wrong with you, Kyle?" he demanded. "Other than mild nearsightedness?" I shot back sarcastically. "I'm doing just fine." "Cut the attitude," he snapped. "Ashley's in a mental hospital, and you don't care." "She's not my wife anymore," I said, my voice sharp. "She destroyed our marriage. Not me. And yeah, I don't care. Why should I?" Jacob's face twisted with fury. "It's your fault she's there. You posted that video, ruined her reputation. She can't get a decent job now. What would happen then?" I replied coldly. "She chose to fight me. Now she's facing the consequences. If she can't find work, maybe she should call her pimp." "You son of a—" Jacob lunged at me, grabbing my vest, but I calmly pried his hand off, not wanting to hurt him. I made it clear, though, I wasn't backing down. "Think carefully before you get physical, Jacob," I warned, my eyes locking with his. "I know you love your daughter, but even you have to see this as her own doing. Wouldn't you have done the same if you were in my shoes?" He stood there for a long moment, shoulders slumped as he exhaled a deep breath. "Maybe I would," he admitted quietly. "It's just easier to be mad at you than to face what she did." I nodded, letting him have that. It wasn't about me anyway. "So what happened?" I asked. Jacob hesitated, then spoke, his voice strained. "She tried to end it, took a bottle of sleeping pills. Greta found her unconscious and called 911. Hearing that made my heart sink. I felt awful for Greta. She'd carry that memory with her forever. But at the same time, I was proud of her for being brave enough to act. I made a mental note to praise her for it later. "How are they doing?" I asked, nodding toward the house, shaken. "Derek's taking it the hardest. Greta won't leave his side," Jacob admitted. I thanked him for telling me and promised to keep a close eye on the kids. When we got home, I sat down with Greta and Derek to talk. I praised Greta for her quick thinking. Her face lit up with pride. She needed that. Derek, though, was still too quiet, too unsure of what all this meant. Weeks later, Ashley was released from the hospital. "They say she's better," I told Pega one night, though I wasn't convinced. "But I don't see how a few weeks of therapy and meds can fix something that deep." When Ashley filed to restore joint custody, I asked the kids how they felt. Greta hesitated. She had her reservations, but Derek was excited at the idea of seeing his mom more often. Pega, ever the practical one, said, "If you fight it, you'll have another long legal battle. You could argue she's unfit. But is it worth it?" I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. "I'm not going to stop her from seeing the kids." "I didn't think you would," Pega replied softly. "I just don't want the kids to go through more trauma." She reached for my hand, and in that small, simple gesture, I realized how lucky I was to have her. Over the past few months, I'd grown closer to her than I ever thought possible. She wasn't just filling a void. She had become my partner in every sense of the word. I took a deep breath, pulled out a small box, and opened it to reveal a ring. "Greta and Derek helped me pick it out," I said, my voice steady but nervous. "I've been thinking about our future." I locked eyes with Pega, my heart racing. "I love you. The kids love you. I don't want to be apart from you anymore. Will you marry me?" Her expression shifted, regret, then sadness, as she gently closed the ring box. "Kyle, this is beautiful, and I'm touched. But marriage?" She shook her head slowly. "You're an amazing man, a great father, and a good partner. But marriage isn't what I want. Especially not with someone who has kids and an ex-wife to deal with." She sighed, her voice soft but firm. "I've loved our time together, but for me it was just fun. It wasn't a step toward marriage." My chest tightened as I absorbed her words. "I see," I said quietly, my voice low. I tossed the ring box onto the counter, a sense of finality settling over me. Thanks for being honest. I'm sorry, Kyle, she said softly, grabbing her things. She walked to the door, and we both knew it was over. I met her at the door, leaning in for one last kiss. But she turned her cheek. That final rejection stung more than I expected. I closed the door behind her, staring at it for longer than I should have, the weight of it all hitting me harder than I expected. The aftermath, the weeks after Pega left, were rough. I'd been through breakups before, but this one was different. Pega was the first woman I truly connected with after my divorce, and letting her go hurt more than I cared to admit. The kids noticed her absence too. One night, Derek asked, his big eyes full of confusion, "Why did Peggy leave, Dad?" "It wasn't about you, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "She just didn't want to see me anymore." Greta, always more perceptive than Derek, seemed to understand there was more to it, but she didn't press me on it. Derek, on the other hand, kept bringing up his dream of me and Ashley getting back together. It was innocent, but it stung every time he mentioned it. I knew I had to move on, for their sake and mine. I went on a few dates after Pega, but I made it clear from the start that I wasn't looking to rush into anything. I was upfront about my situation. 2 kids, a messy ex, and a busy job. Most women didn't stick around after hearing that. And honestly, I didn't blame them. Life felt lonelier than ever. Oddly enough, I still talked to Honora from time to time. She'd divorced Nate, but she hadn't taken him to the cleaners like I'd thought she might. One day, while she was picking up her son Terry from my place, she mentioned something that caught my attention. "I didn't want the big house," she told me, as we stood in the kitchen. "Too many memories. I just wanted a home, not a status symbol." "So what did you do?" I asked, curious how she navigated the aftermath. "We sold the house, split the equity, each got our own place," she said, her voice laced with a hint of pride. "I didn't push for the maximum alimony either. I'm stronger than that." I nodded, respecting her. Honora had never judged me for what I did with the video. She'd been the one person who seemed to understand. "I can't blame you," she told me once. "But you know that video isn't going to win you custody unless Ashley agrees, right?" "Yeah, I know," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "But I had to do something." "You're still angry," she observed, knowing me well. I let out a deep breath. "Not as much as I used to be," I said honestly. She nodded and changed the subject. "How are the kids?" "They're doing okay. Derek still thinks his mom and I are going to get back together. But Greta's too smart to believe that." "Kids grow up fast," Honora said, her eyes distant with nostalgia. "Yeah, they do," I agreed. Her son, Terry, and Derek were in the same grade, so he spent a lot of time at my place. One afternoon, when Honora came to pick up Terry, she spotted the ring box on my counter. "What's this?" she asked, holding it up. I sighed. "What's left of my engagement to Pega," I said after explaining the story. She shook her head, genuinely sad for me. "I'm sorry, Kyle." "Don't be," I said with a shrug. "I'm just not great at picking the right people." She chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Join the club," she said. "I'm not much better." We both laughed, but it wasn't really funny. I could tell Honora had found someone new, though she didn't say much about him. Still, there was a glow about her now, like she had something to look forward to. "Do you think the problem is me?" I asked suddenly, my voice quiet. She tilted her head, thinking it over before answering carefully. "Maybe you have unresolved issues," Honora said. "You never figured out why Ashley cheated." I felt a lump in my throat, but I didn't say anything. The truth was, I didn't think I ever would. "Did you?" Honora asked, her voice soft but probing. "That might still be weighing you down." "No," I replied, shaking my head. "I never asked her." "Why not?" "I didn't think it would change anything." "Maybe it won't," she said with a shrug. "But what do you have to lose?" "Good point," I muttered. "Can't hurt, I guess." That Sunday, as I dropped Greta and Derek off at Ashley's house, I decided to do it. Derek looked confused. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I need to talk to your mom," I said calmly. Okay, he said with a shrug, heading inside. Greta eyed me suspiciously but didn't say anything. I knocked, and Ashley answered, her expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. What do you want? She asked bluntly. I want to talk to you in private. She glanced at the kids, then nodded for them to head inside. Crossing her arms, she leaned against the doorframe, a defensive posture. What does the great Kyle want now? She sneered. I didn't hesitate. I want to know why you cheated on me. Her face twisted in confusion. What? I want to know why. I repeated, my voice calm but firm. It's been over a year, Kyle. Why ask now? I was too angry to care before, I admitted. But now I want to know why you destroyed our marriage. Her jaw tightened. You're blaming it all on me? You're the one who cheated, I countered, not taking the bait. I never did, she said sharply. If you don't want to tell me, just say so, I said. I'll leave. She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the side like she was searching for an escape. Then something shifted. She met my gaze, and I could see the cracks in her armor. I felt the desire to be with another woman, she said quietly. Then why didn't you figure that out before we got married? I asked, struggling to keep my cool. I tried, she admitted. Back in college, I chickened out. I was scared my parents would find out. She paused, then continued. But one night, Laura caught me alone in the women's locker room. After that, I couldn't give her up. Damn it, Ashley, I said, my frustration bubbling over. It couldn't have been that hard. And what about Nate? You didn't just cheat with another woman. You cheated with a man too. She lowered her head. He started as a client, she muttered. He kept pushing, and I gave in. So it wasn't just one mistake? I asked, barely able to hold back my anger. No, she whispered. It went on for weeks until you stopped it. I let out a bitter laugh. You're blaming me now? No, she said softly. I'm not blaming you. You did end it, though. I paused, feeling the sting. Wish I hadn't asked. Ashley's voice cracked. I told the kids the divorce was my fault, not yours. Thank you for that, I said, feeling a small weight lift off my chest. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Wait, she said quietly. I have questions too. I turned slowly, bracing myself. Go ahead. Why did you give up on me so easily? She asked, confusion and hurt in her eyes. Why didn't you fight for me? I let out a short, bitter laugh. That's ridiculous, I snapped. Don't you remember all those conversations we had while dating? We talked about how infidelity destroys families. I told you, plain as day, that cheating was the one thing I'd never forgive. There was nothing left to fight for after you made that choice. She sniffed, wiping her eyes. How did you even find out? We were so careful. I chuckled, the sound cold. It was pure luck, I said. Then I told her the story of that day, how GeoScope, of all things, had exposed her. Her eyes widened in disbelief. GeoScope? She said, shaking her head. That's crazy. I smiled grimly. A view from the sky right into my life. It'd be funny if it wasn't so tragic. Her expression softened, and her sorrow was palpable. Kyle, I'm really sorry, she said quietly. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday you can let go of the anger. I nodded slowly, staring off at the street. I don't know if that'll happen, I admitted, then took a step toward the stairs. But thanks for saying it. That was the last time Ashley and I spoke face to face for a long time. A year passed, and my personal life stayed the same. I went on a few dates but wasn't looking for anything serious. My kids were my focus, and watching them grow became my greatest joy. Derek, now 10, had taken an interest in the family business. He loved helping me with the plants, especially the Japanese rock gardens. Greta, at 12, leaned toward healthcare, always talking about wanting to help people. She still had plenty of time to figure it out, but I could see her passion growing. It was my concern for Greta that got me roped into chaperoning the school sock hop that fall. Honora and her new husband, Leo, convinced me to help out. If you've got kids that age, you know how hard it is to get parents to volunteer for those events. So, there I was, standing awkwardly in the gym, watching kids bounce around to music I didn't recognize. "Hi," Honora said, sneaking up on me. I flinched. "Whoa," I said, startled. "What? Why don't you go talk to her?" she said, mischievously nodding toward a woman across the gym. "Honora, what are you talking about?" I asked, puzzled. "That teacher over there," she said, pointing toward a woman in a cream and charcoal sweater. "She's been looking at you all night. Go talk to her before the event ends." I glanced at the woman. She was about my age, maybe a little younger. "You sure she's looking at me?" I asked skeptically. Honora rolled her eyes. "Trust me, Kyle. Women notice these things. Go for it." I shrugged. Why not? I hadn't had much luck dating recently, so I figured I'd give it a shot. As I walked toward her, she turned, and our eyes locked. Her bright green eyes were striking, like emeralds catching the light. Honora was right. She had been looking at me. "Hi," I said, stopping in front of her. "I'm Kyle Baldwin, Greta and Derek's dad." She smiled warmly, extending her hand. "Hi, Kyle. I'm Nobby, Roger James's mom. I teach 6th grade here. Nice to meet you." "Maybe," I smiled back. "Likewise. It's rare to see a single dad chaperoning," she said. I shrugged. "My kids are worth it. Besides, it's not like I had other plans." Her eyebrow lifted. "How do you know I'm single?" "Your ring finger is empty," I said with a playful grin. "And the woman you were just talking to is here with her husband." She chuckled. "I'm good at people watching, and you seemed unattached." I laughed. "You're observant." She grinned. "Yeah, I'm single." I realized I was still holding her hand. "Sorry," I mumbled, letting go awkwardly. "Don't be," she said with a smile. "If it bothered me, I would have told you." Her smile lit up her whole face, and for a moment, I was completely captivated. We talked for a while, swapping stories about our kids, Greta's interest in healthcare and Derek's fascination with landscaping. Nobby shared stories about her son James and his love for electronics. Before I knew it, Honora nudged me. "Time to pack up, Kyle," she said, smirking. "The DJ's already packing up." We gathered the kids, made sure they were with the right parents, and helped clean up the gym. As we walked to the parking lot, Nobby surprised me by slipping her hand into mine. "Call me sometime," she said, sliding a folded piece of paper into my shirt pocket. "I'd love to have dinner with you." Then she and James headed to their car and drove off. That night marked a new beginning. I didn't wait long to call her. Our first dinner date didn't end in the bedroom, but it did end with a few sweet kisses. Nobby wasn't like the other women I dated. She was cautious, but sincere, clearly interested in me, but not in a rush. Over time, Nobby and I grew closer. She was smart, practical, and resourceful. Though money was tight, she had all these clever life hacks for saving. She'd share them with me, and I found myself doing the same for her. I helped bring her backyard to life. Her black thumb, as she called it, had killed plant after plant. But with a little guidance, we transformed her patio into a cozy outdoor living space. As our relationship deepened, I opened up about my past. First Ashley, then Pega. Nobby's reaction surprised me. "Actions have consequences," she said plainly. All things considered, Ashley got off easy. I raised an eyebrow. "Unlike most women," I said, half joking. But Nobby wasn't fazed. She didn't see me as some vengeful ex. If anything, she respected that I stood my ground. Greta, Derek, and James got along well. It was a relief to see the kids bonding without hesitation. After 8 months together, I found myself thinking about marriage again. The disaster with Pega still lingered, but I wasn't going to let the past dictate my future. I talked to the kids about it. Greta was thrilled, but Derek seemed hesitant. I suspected he still harbored hope that Ashley and I would get back together. But he didn't argue. I bought another engagement ring, not the one I'd planned for Pega. This time, I knew exactly how I wanted to propose. I decided to do it on my 40th birthday, which was only 2 weeks away. The plan was simple. A small party with close friends, family, Nobby, and James. The only challenge was keeping the kids from spilling the secret. And I had to make sure Nobby didn't suspect anything. When the big day arrived, my parents rented a private room at Lock, a local spot known for its Chinese cuisine. The dinner was incredible. We ate, laughed, and danced until our feet ached. When it was time for gifts, I unwrapped each one with gratitude, thanking everyone for their thoughtfulness. Nobby seemed surprised to see her parents and brother there, but she kept her composure. Once the last present was opened, I stood, wrapping my arms around her and pulling her close. She rested her head on my chest, and I smiled at the group. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I said, my heart full of warmth. "This has been the best 40th birthday I could have asked for." A few polite chuckles filled the room. I heard one of the kids whisper, "I don't get it," which made the adults laugh even harder. The laughter was the perfect cover for Honora, who slipped the small ring box into my hand. I gripped it tightly, my heart pounding. "This is it," I thought. "There's just one last thing I want to do before we all head home," I announced. My voice trembled slightly. "I've gotten some amazing gifts tonight, but I'm hoping for just one more." Nobby tilted her head, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I turned to face her, grinning as I met her eyes. "Nobby, I love you," I said, feeling my heart swell. "You've made my life whole in a way I didn't think was possible. But there's one more thing that could make it even better." I knelt down on one knee, pulling out the ring box and opening it to reveal the diamond inside. Her breath caught, and her hands flew to her mouth. The room fell completely silent as everyone realized what was happening. "Nobby Rogers," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. "Will you marry me?" Her eyes darted around the room, first to her parents, then to her brother, and finally back to me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I waited and waited, too long. "Nobby," I said softly, my voice cracking. "Please say something." Her eyes flicked away from mine, her breath shaky. She mumbled, glancing around the room as if she were searching for an escape. This isn't really the right time to talk about this," she stammered, taking a step back. "Maybe we should." Her voice trailed off, and I felt something inside me break. Slowly, I stood up, the weight of the moment sinking in. "Got it," I said quietly, slipping the ring back into its box and tucking it into my pocket. "James," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "let's go." Nobby rushed toward the door, grabbing James's hand without even stopping to grab her coat. The door slammed behind them with a hollow thud, the sound echoing in the quiet room. I stood there, stunned, unable to process what had just happened. Then I noticed everyone's eyes on me. Family, friends, my kids. They stared in wide-eyed disbelief. "Well," I said, forcing a wide, fake smile. "Thanks for coming, everyone. You made this a birthday to remember." The room stayed silent. Honora looked at me, wanting to offer comfort, but unsure if I wanted it. I gathered my things, slipped on my coat, and motioned to Greta and Derek. "Honey," my mom said gently, taking my hand. "Do you want us to take the kids tonight?" I shrugged. "Do you guys want to spend the night with Nana and Pappy?" "Yeah," Derek said eagerly. Greta wasn't as quick to answer. She walked up and hugged me tight, her voice soft. "Daddy, I'm so sorry." "Thanks, honey," I whispered, squeezing her gently. "But you don't have to say anything." "I love you, Daddy," she whispered, her arms gripping me tighter. "I love you too," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. After sending the kids off with my parents, I headed home alone. The drive was short, but it felt like an eternity. When I finally got inside, I locked the door, tossed my coat on the couch, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. It didn't last long enough to numb the pain. I thought about making a trip to the liquor store, but decided against it. Getting drunk wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I sank into a chair and turned on Netflix, letting some old 80s sitcoms play in the background. I wasn't really watching. A couple of hours later, I dozed off, waking with a stiff back. Never sleeping in this chair again, I muttered as I stretched. I got up, showered, and went through my usual morning routine. It wasn't until I was halfway through breakfast that I realized I hadn't turned my phone back on since last night. When I did, I was bombarded with notifications. My voicemail was full, and there were a bunch of text messages from friends offering sympathy and support. One stood out. It was from Nabi. Her voicemail was short, just a few seconds long. "I'm sorry, Kyle," her voice said softly. "Please believe me, I have my reasons. I hope someday you'll understand and forgive me. Goodbye." I didn't respond. I didn't call her back. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, doing everything I could to avoid thinking about her. It's been 10 years since my divorce from Ashley. Greta's in college now, studying nursing like she always dreamed of. Derek just graduated from high school and plans to study business. Whether he'll join the family company is still up in the air. As for me, I'm 45 now, still single. Occasionally, I meet someone and have a little fun, but I haven't met anyone I'd call special. Peggy came back into my life about a year ago. She made it clear she was only looking for a good time, nothing more. We hung out for a couple of months, parted ways without any hard feelings. One night, she asked me, "Why didn't you ever get married again?" I shrugged. "It's not worth the risk anymore. I'd love to have a wife, but not every story has a happy ending." I later heard that Nabi moved in with someone about a year after my failed proposal. Her parents even reached out, hoping I could convince her to come back to me. I thought it was absurd. She left me, and I wasn't about to chase her. Ashley eventually remarried, this time to the owner of the diner where she works. The kids say they're happy. And for his sake, I hope he and Ashley signed a prenup. My father passed away a few months ago, and now Baldwin Landscaping is officially mine. My mom hasn't been the same since. Grief clings to her, weighing her down. Every word she speaks sounds heavier, like it's dragging her down with it. I always wanted a marriage like my parents had, loving, loyal, committed. But maybe that kind of love doesn't exist anymore. I'm a landscaper, not a philosopher, so I'll leave those questions to the experts. Before she left for the second time, Peggy asked me a question that stuck with me. "Do you have any regrets, Kyle?" "Of course I do," I said without hesitation. "I regret marrying a cheater. I regret wasting time with Peggy and Nabi, thinking they were life partners. I regret not finding someone who shares my values." But that wasn't what she was really asking. She wanted to know if I regretted making Ashley infamous, if I regretted divorcing her, if I regretted hating her for so long. "No," I told her firmly. "I regret that posting the video was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. And I never will." She got what she deserved. If I had to do it all over again, I'd do it the same way. She liked that answer but didn't argue. As for me, I'll keep working. I'll keep loving my kids and watching them grow. I look forward to my grandkids. One day, maybe I'll find a wife. Maybe I won't. But it's no longer a priority. Not every story has a fairy tale ending. But this isn't a bad life. Not bad at all.